Welcome to Pro Talks. My name is Gail Washington with Professional Support Staff, my company, and I just wanted to tell you happy Tuesday, and we're going to be going over some different things about W2's, W3's, what's reportable, when's their due dates, just a real bird's eye view of W2's and what actually goes on them. I get a lot of questions on W2's and W3's, and especially with pastors' housing allowance and clergy, and how do you report that, and what's legal and what's not, those kind of things. So today we're going to start by starting to talk about payroll in general. We've talked about taxes. We've talked about federal payroll taxes. And we've also talked in the Pro Talks about state payroll taxes. You need to make sure that you're taking care of anything of your state. Sometimes this is overlooked. The reason being is each state is different. The state of Tennessee does not have a withholding tax. So therefore, anybody in the state of Tennessee does not have to report to the state. But if you're in North Carolina, you do. And there's an amount withheld off of the compensation of every employee, including the pastor on that. He does have to pay state taxes as well. So make sure you get on your website. If you need help with setting your payroll up, we can help you. We can process it. We can do all kinds of things and take care of all the state taxes and everything. But you need to make sure that you're compliant with that, especially if there's new laws affect and who's exempt and who's not. There's all different kinds of things from state to state. So make sure that you investigate that very well. But 941 payroll taxes, that's the federal withholding and Social Security, which we call FICA. It's where we withdraw all of the money out of the employees, plus the church itself puts in 7.65%, and they are reported in a document called 941. Those are due every single quarter. You pay those taxes in sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, depending on how the IRS sets you up. There's a setup procedure with electronic portal that they set you up with as well, and you can do that from the IRS. But the 941s must be paid on time. It is very, very, very important because there are so many penalties on 941s. If you do not pay them on time, it can be very, very expensive, and they don't take that lightly because you actually took money from an employee and you're supposed to report it to them as well as pay in. So they're not lenient on delinquent payroll taxes. So that's one of the things that you really, really need to make sure you're doing correctly. Pro Support staff can help you with that. If it eases your mind, peace of mind, if we can help you with that, help you set it up, or maybe for one of our low packages, you may just want us to process your payroll, and we can do that every week, and it takes all that out of your aggravation. You don't have to keep up with it, and we report all the taxes and everything and pay everything for you on the back end through your own software. That's the greatest thing. So you have everything in your software. You're privy to everything, and we just actually come in and do the processing on the back end. But 941s are very important. You pay in each either week or month, whatever the IRS sets you up with, and it's their determination what they say, how they set you up when it is due. And then you have a quarterly. So at the end of the quarter, you have the next 30 days to send in your 941. Your 941 reflects all of your payments, all of your compensation, all the math, and what you owe at the end if you still owe something and have not paid them up. So in each quarter, those are due. So you've got 4 quarters. So each quarter, you would actually file your 941s on time. Make sure they're on time. Like I said, very, very, very important. So you definitely need to be filing your payroll taxes correctly. And so once those 4 are done, then the reason I even brought up 941s is I wanted to talk a little bit about your year-end W2's, W3's, all of those things. We're going to talk at a different time about 1099s because that's really not a payroll issue. That is more so a accounts payable situation. So we're going to talk later in another Pro Talk about 1099s, but we are going to talk today about W2's and all your payroll taxes. So I wanted to go over the 941. Very important. By the way, if you have a correction or somebody did not do the 941s correctly, you can do a 941X and get it corrected. If you need help with that, please call us, okay? If there's an error, if you get a notice and there was an error and there needs to be a refiling, and I'm going to tell you how that all comes together and how the IRS and the Social Security actually have a double check so that you can understand how important the 941s are and the W2's. So basically, your W2's goes to every single person that is getting compensation. The best way to do this is if you have a payroll software, do it through the software. It's very, very important on payroll that you set it up properly. If you set it up properly, then you're going to get the right results and it'll come out correctly for the IRS on the W-2s as well. So we want to make sure their name's right. We want to double check and make sure all the Social Security information's correct on their Social Security number, address, legal name, all of those things need to be correct on there because that can red flag somebody's W-2 and you don't want to do that. And so basically on W-2s, we want to make sure all of their profile and personal information is correct before we print them at the end of the year. As you go through your payroll and are processing your payroll, it goes through your software and it will, if it's set up properly, it will actually allocate it into the right boxes at the end of the year. So you say, well, that's pretty simple. Well, it is, but you've got to make sure that you're doing that correctly. For instance, on clergy or people with pastor's housing allowance, or you're a pastor or ordained minister, maybe you're a minister and you're ordained and you're in a nonprofit, whatever it may be, but your W-2 should not reflect any Social Security or Medicare out of it. You say, what? Well, my pastor doesn't want to opt out of that. Well, they don't have to, but the church cannot legally take out FICA tax on the pastor or ordained minister that has housing allowance and is claiming that because that is their legal right. Do they report it when they do their taxes? Yes, that's a tax thing they can get with their CPA or tax preparer, and they will ask them, we're still paying into Social Security and Medicare, correct? And a lot of them are opting in. Maybe they're not. And that would be determined as the pastor would decide that with their tax preparer. So, but the W-2 for the pastor should look like gross wages, federal withholding tax, and no other compensation in the compensation part of the W-2. And if they have a retirement, that would go on there. Health insurance would go there. And housing allowance would go on the W-2. I always encourage people, put the housing allowance on there in box 14, and you can actually title it housing allowance. Softwares will let you do that. Also, make sure that you're in your box 12s. There's different codes. One's for health insurance, one's for retirement. And you can also make sure that they're getting that. Like I said, make sure those things are coming on the W-2. You say, well, they don't pay for their retirement or they don't pay for their health insurance. You still need to report that on the W-2 unless you have a big group plan like Blue Cross Blue Shield with so many members, and they will report it for you to the government. So that's what you need to determine, those kind of things. But on most churches, you definitely need it on the W-2 for a pastor, especially, and any other employee, by the way. So all other employees, non-pastor, non-housing allowance, ordained ministers, those things, you will see the compensation for gross wages and federal withholding tax. You will also see for Social Security and Medicare and how much is set aside for that. So that would be where you deduct it from. So it's all in your setup. So make sure one of the biggest mistakes churches make and pastors' W-2s are they are taking out FICA on them on the W-2. And so they should not be doing that. And there's a way for pastors to get that back into their salary because you can do that and give them extra to take care of that 7.65 that the church was paying them for. And we can gross that up. But you can give us a call if you need to do that, or maybe you want to look into it. And like I said, we've always got our payroll processing packages, and they start very, very, very inexpensive. And so give us a call, 865-272-6550. But make sure, I can't stress enough, make sure you're doing that properly. I've seen churches, not to give a scare tactic, but I've seen churches get themselves in trouble with 941 payroll tax and literally had to sell property to meet the requirement of the IRS, and they were coming after them criminally. Do your payroll taxes correctly and your payroll. Super, super, super important. So I just can't stress that enough. So on your W-2, you need to make sure those things are being done. Make sure your retirement plans are being done. Then what happens is you also do a W-3. What is a W-3? When you run out all of your W-2s, and the IRS is really encouraging people to file their W-2s electronically, and you can do that on irs.gov, super easy. And then a W-3 is a total or summary of all your W-2s. And so you need a W-3. The W-3 goes to the Social Security, and the W-2s also. So what happens is the W-2s need to match the W-3. So we need to make sure that those are reconciled so that your W-2s and your W-3 match as far as grand totals. Now, this is where the 941 comes in. And I hope I don't confuse you on this. At each quarter that is filed, a 941 will have the gross wages, what was taking out in federal withholding tax, what was taking out of the checks for Social Security and Med, and what the entity, church, nonprofit, small business, is contributing to that at the 7.65. So all those figures, grand totals, are on the 941s. So your 4 quarters of 941 should match your W-3, which is your total of what you've got, what you took out of people's salaries all year, and the withholding tax and the FICA tax should match those. 941s go to the IRS. All the W-3s go to Social Security, and they compare. And that's the reason it's so important. You have to file your W-2s with the Social Security Administration and with the IRS. You need to make sure that you're reporting that. I've had a client of mine, didn't realize it, whatever oversight, did not report the W-2s and the W-3 to the IRS back in 2016, and there is a civil penalty that we're trying to get waived that is thousands of dollars. And so you don't want to do that. And the whole reason that they have that penalty is not because they owe any more tax, it's because they did not report, they did not send in their W-2 and W-3. And so make sure you do that. You can't just, and if you're doing it a different way where you're trying to do those manually or whatever, make sure they are correct. Make sure your math matches. Make sure your 941s equal to your W-3, and make sure your W-2s all meet your W-3. So I hope I didn't confuse you too much there, but I hope there's some helpful hints there. If you are unclear about that, or you do not think that please give us a call. This is an area that the government can get in and come in audit you, because payroll and payroll taxes is not separation of church and state. It is a legal right as a U.S. citizen to have to report those, and as an employer of any sort, nonprofit, business, whatever it is, church, they all are required to report those. So make sure you're doing that, because I've seen so many churches get in so much trouble because of payroll alone, and it can be done the right way just as easy. And so I hope this has been a help. I hope it triggered some things, even if I, maybe brought out something that you didn't know, one little tidbit, then I know it's a help. So until next Tuesday, keep serving the Lord, keep doing what's right, and we'll see you next Tuesday.